Hello and welcome to Green Horizons, a new frontier. This special edition is brought to you by the Environmental Investment Fund. In recent memory, Namibians had to witness the country's worst drought, which led to farmers losing livestock at an unprecedented rate. Those living in arid areas had to endure heat never seen before, and crop producers were also not spared as they stood by helplessly when their harvest vanished in front of their eyes. While these developments indicate that global warming is indeed real, there have been initiatives that try to create a balance. The Environmental Investment Fund is the pioneering fund set up by government and established under the Environmental Investment Fund of Namibia Act of 2001. In this episode, we will look at the functions of the EIF and investigate how they go about creating a paradigm shift in these changing times. The fund has two programs that have been introduced to mitigate different environmental circumstances. The Climate Resilient Agriculture Arm is active in 3 of the vulnerable extreme north crop growing regions and is known by its acronym CRAVE. The program uses smart agricultural practices and technologies are introduced to help make food security possible using minimal resources. Another example that the Enhanced Direct Access program is having an impact is at Namagoro. It's a 20-meter by 50-meter greenhouse at Namagoro, which has been erected using biodegradable plastic to fumigate insects before the planting season. The plants here are watered using a drip irrigation system. They use 2 liters per plant using the drip irrigation per 1 hour in the morning at around about 8 o'clock, while another liter drips at 4 o'clock in the afternoon, making it 2 liters per day on tomatoes, for example. The types of twines used here are bio-violent twine. These twines is 100% organic, compostable, and is made of high-quality plastic which does not damage the plants. Lucas Mandema explains in more detail just how these new practices are making life easier at this village far from the river.
The first activity we did is to rehabilitate the the borehole with solar. So they normally used to use electrical system where every day they have to pay money for them to be pumping water. And then also they had an issue of every now and then the element was burning inside the borehole. So when we came, we rehabilitated and we put a solar system. So this solar system is able to supply 30,000 cubic of water to the community, and then it's taking about 800 meters both sides of the community in terms of water. So now with that, we are also now tapping it to get a supplementary income so that this income can sustain the community. So even someone who was doing a backyard gardening at the back of his yard, he can able to make this smaller area that he can generate that an amount. Just imagine 90 centimeter by 18 can give you already 18,000, which is a smaller area. If you look at that 90 centimeter by 18 by 1.8, it will give you maybe close to about, let's say 18 square meters. Yes, so or 48 square meters, which is less that you are required for you to produce or sustain your family. So even one family cannot able to consume 1,200 kg of tomato. That is a lot.
The EIF has sourced over 160 million from the Green Climate Fund to be able to allow projects like the one at Namagoro to thrive. But the task isn't easy, as Chief Operations Officer Karl Aribeb explains.
as a country, Namibian government has really invested before the establishment of the GCF in being compliant with the requirements of the UN Convention on Climate Change. One of the requirements is that the governments must really determine the vulnerability of its citizens to climate change and also identify possible interventions to mitigate against the impacts of climate change. So in our case, our government has done all of those, and there was a list of possible interventions that we had to choose from, which basically answered many of the questions that GCF has had. So in that respect, we built on a foundation that was laid by our national government. We have an attitude here at EIF to be among the early birds. When new opportunity arises, you hit that opportunity to count among the early arrivals. And that's what we exactly have done with GCF. And we jumped on the announcement of the funding as early as possible after our accreditation with the GCF. And we submitted 4 applications, and then those applications were approved sequentially over a period of about 4 years. 2 got immediately approved in the first attempt, and the third one later on, and the last one was approved in 2019, which is now getting off the ground.
Most of the funds within CRAVE are used for field research, trial and demonstration sites, as well as organic fertilizers. One such site that has benefited is Namibia, which might not look like much at first, but has certainly turned the lives of many farmers around. Here, they practice conservation agriculture mixed with organic farming. The soil surface is covered fully to attain the necessary moisture, while fertilizers used here to boost the growth is a liquid fertilizer from animal dung. Here at Namibia, these farmers have readily available fresh produce that is sold to clients, including passerby. Another key stakeholder is the Ministry of Water, Agriculture and Land Reform, have played a major role in the implementation aspect. The Pe Havarwa from the Kavango West spoke on the need to make these projects sustainable.
The training and information sharing with farmers, that's our core objective as extension services. But particularly to these people, even as with a project, they also have that privilege through the project to be trained specifically for them, tailor-made training that are for them through the whole process. So many type of trainings will be organized. The technical staff also be trained. Them, they will also be trained on a regular basis. So the training is on even through the donor now, and even after the donor have gone, the training will always going to continue with them. We are being labeled as one of the poorest regions, but given the resources that we have, the water and fertile soil, the question is always being asked, why can't we not produce our own food? So this is a type of development that we expect in the region, that we are able to enhance the livelihood of the people, where we are assisting. They have the knowledge, they have been producing for years, they know how to produce, but they have been struggling. How do we extract water from the river for us to irrigate? They have to use bucket and so on to get, and being very close to the river. I'm sure you have seen some of those crop fields that are very close to the river, and becoming very dangerous to them. So these are type of development that we are trying to provide them with everything. This type of technology, drip irrigations that we have in here, solar-powered irrigation systems, or the pump that's being provided water into the garden. So this is the type of development that honestly that we want to have these people, to help them improve their productions and to make sure that they produce enough for themselves, and even at the regional level and at the country at large.
Another impressive site is the Salem demo site, which appears to always be busy. Everyone is always watering or clearing their allocated hectares for the next production cycle. The fund has spent in excess of 13 million Namibian dollars on solar solutions. Why so much? Well, the answer is simple. Namibia has plenty of sun. It's the one thing that Namibia has in abundance. Many farmers, either next to the river or inland, have had their farms retrofitted with solar installations to help them divert those resources to employment or just enhanced production. Aina Maria Iteta, Head of Monitoring and Evaluation at the EIF, shares more light on their achievements.
The implementation of the ongoing projects over and above, I can say that generally we are actually meeting our targets as per the set targets in our logical framework for the projects that we have submitted now to the GCF. So generally I would say mostly, because these activities are actually at different stage, and there are a few challenges and hiccups here and there. However, if you have to average in terms of the current performance in this activity, the projects are really doing quite a significant achievement on the ground. But we will deal with the few challenges that we have picked up to make things much better. This project is supposed to create job opportunities for our local communities. And our SME, they, as much as we have to give them job, challenges are there equally, be it capacity to implement, but they have to start somewhere. And that is what we are working together with them to ensure that we also don't just drop them, but we also build capacity for them to actually move to the next level. Otherwise, if it's an issue of just looking at what we are delivering and not accommodating the whole growth at home strategy, it does not add value. And the interest here is to ensure that everybody in the value chain there, those who are providing all sorts of service from the technical engineering and the material supply, are also catered for.
There are also challenges, but Iteta assures all that remedies are lined up.
It is quite eminent that we keep intact that all the development, all the process, be it procurement, be it technically experts that are needed on the ground, we should reach a common ground to understand what exactly is needed there. So one of the challenges we have definitely picked up, and for us moving forward, definitely we are expecting to make things work differently, and we are also learning from this shortfall as we move forward. It's that communication and coordination of activities, one of the biggest challenges that we have. Definitely we have to deploy probably our team more often, especially from the project management, to be on the ground.
After the break, we speak to Chief Executive Officer Benedict Libanda about the political support in this uncharted territory for the fund. Welcome back. Before the break, we saw how CRAVE has been shaping and changing lives. Now, it's time to turn our focus to another equally important EIF project. The project is titled Empower to Adapt, Creating Climate Change Resilient Livelihoods Through Community-Based Natural Resources Management, the CBNRM EDA. The financing from the Green Climate Fund for this project was obtained through a window called Enhanced Direct Access, or EDA. One community that has benefited directly from this project are the Lusese flood victims. They live in this lush water world because it's their tradition. They fish, graze their livestock, and literally they follow the water. But there is a twist. Flood waters from the Angolan highlands that also fills the Okavango Delta continues to transform Lusese and submerge these homesteads, forcing the inhabitants to flee to higher grounds annually. The fund built these communities climate-resilient infrastructure to house the masses and also established classrooms. The community has been provided with a boat to ferry people from these floodplains to higher grounds. In addition, an early alert system has also been made possible. Selma Shitilifa is a project manager and gives an insight into how the fund works to impact the targeted communities.
The project is 5 years, started in 2017,
and it's expected to end by 2022. The project targets gazetted communal conservancies and community forests as direct beneficiaries of this project. And of course, the project was to be implemented into two components. The first component deals more with capacity building, where we were actually trying to train these beneficiaries on how to access funding from the project fund facility or grant facility. And then the second component deals now with the actual grant facility, where we are giving money to the conservancy in the form of grants. And it is in 3 investment windows, which is climate resilient agriculture, climate-proof infrastructure, and ecosystem-based adaptation. To date, we have awarded a total of 19 grants to various regions, 8 regions, and it's totaling to an amount of 86 million Namibian dollars. And these projects are more in line with water rehabilitation projects, climate agriculture, smart agriculture practices, micro drip irrigation system. It also has to do with fire management and honey production in some of the landscapes that we have in the projects. It's worth noting that we are already working with existing programs that have been established. There's an existing CBNRM program where communities already are empowered to manage their resources and as well as be able to utilize them sustainably. So what the project came to do is really just to capitalize on the already existing programs, and we can see that there has at least really been transformation, and there has been paradigm shift in the way of doing things for these communities, because the idea is to make sure that even though we have the impact of climate change, we should still be able to sustain and maintain and improve the livelihoods of these communities within these CBOs.
Speaking to the people directly involved is essential, but what about those in charge at the very top? Green Horizon team sat down with an exclusive interview with the Chief Executive Officer of the EIF, Benedict Libanda, to investigate the functionality of the EIF.
The Environmental Investment Fund is working in the sector that is still emerging. Environmental financing, climate change financing, biodiversity financing, these are new sectors that are emerging, and if you look around the world, especially developing countries, very few countries have such institutions in place. And because of our risks towards natural calamities as the countries, Namibia had to prioritize this institution. So, and we need a lot of education and awareness, going out to the public, to inform them of the nature of the institutions, which is involved, raising, capital, funding from different sources of funding. This might be the domestic source, where we raise funding for project investment from the area of environmental taxation, budget appropriations from government, and also local sponsorship. At an international source, we target multilateral environmental and climate finance institutions, which is mainly the Green Climate Fund, the Global Environmental Facilities, the Climate Investment Funds, etc. With the multilateral environmental and climate funds, grants that are channeled for the most impoverished communities who are at risk of environmental and climate change, calamities. For development finance institutions, we target more the private sectors, more business-oriented, projects that provides return and at the same time addresses the issues of climate change and environmental degradation. Then the local domestic resources, some of those resources contribute towards the operations of the fund. Some of those resources are earmarked for soft interventions such as environmental awareness, bursary capacity building in the area of environmental and climate change, as well as sponsorship and grant financing. So it is a complicated institution that is cross-cutting at all sectors, but occupying a niche area of climate and environmental sustainability. I think what we should remind ourselves is the ecological nature of Namibia. Let's first step back. Namibia was one of the first countries in 1992 to present a green plan at the Sustainable Development Summit in Rio. This is because the nature of our landscape and how Namibia is positioned from a climatic point of view is one of the most vulnerable countries in sub-Saharan Africa. By that, Namibia had to come up with legal statutes and policy directives to ensure that there's an enabling environment to tackle issues of biodiversity conservation, climate change, and land degradation. Hence, Article 95 of our Constitution was embeds issues of sustainable development, the wise utilization of natural resources and livelihoods. So it stems from that high level processes. And then we developed tools, implementation tools as a country to implement interventions that address issues of climate change and environmental sustainability. This comes through different acts and policies developed by the Ministry of Environment, Forest and Tourism. This includes the National Climate Change Policy and the National Climate Change Action Plan and Strategy, the biodiversity policies, the land degradation policies, etc. And those national policies and programs ought to be implemented and executed on the ground. And that gives an enabling environment for the EIF to respond to those strategies, because it identifies challenges on the ground, also identify opportunities on how to address them. So most of the opportunities that come along these kind of challenges is changing the way we plow in the agricultural sector, how we produce food, by incorporating agricultural resilient practice. And this is what you saw in Rundu or Kavango, the two Kavango regions. Once the project and the funding arrives in the country, we do stakeholders consultations where an inception phase is included. And that's an opportunity to introduce the project further to stakeholders at sub-national level or regional level. The governors of the regions are briefed on that particular project. Local leadership in the regions also are given an opportunity to look at the projects, comment, and see where amendments could be made. And that is still a process of gathering and consolidating political support and leadership. I'm glad that in all the 4 projects that we are implementing, have gone through that stage, and we enjoy the support of those leaders at different levels: national leadership, regional leadership, and also stakeholders that contribute and affected by the projects.
For an entity that sources funding on this scale, surely there must be an agreement in place with educational institutions.
Noting that we work across all sectors, the best strategy is to find the most collaborative way of working together. So we've got a memorandum of understanding with the University of Namibia that assists us with research, assists us with interns. We've got a very good internship program. We've got another MOU with CRAVE, which is an agricultural, climate change and environmental research institution for Southern Africa. They help us with scientific information that we need to inform our actions to respond to climate change and environmental sustainability. We've got a number of other memorandum of understanding that are still being pursued with Namibian institutions in the energy sector as well as in the agricultural sector. So that collaborative approach is what makes efficiency in our implementations, and more partnerships are envisaged to be established for us to implement activities effectively on the ground.
The Environmental Investment Fund might still be on the rise, but their impact is already huge. From supporting ordinary farmers making ends meet to helping flood victims and communities to sustainably manage their natural resources, it's evident that global warming is real, and Namibians need a pragmatic approach to tackling the challenge head-on.